Hey guys, it's Chris from On and Off Machinery Mart. Today I'm here with Simon from Graco. They're going to be giving us a little tour, a little bit of an introduction to all of the airless spray machines. How's it, Simon? How are you doing today?
Great, so thanks for having me here.
It's a pleasure. So, can you give us a little bit of an introduction, a little bit of what can it do, what can't it do with the GX21 over here?
Sure. GX21 has been around a couple of years. It's one of our smaller units. When I say smaller, it looks small. It works very, very well. Market aiming is sort of DIY, handyman, and light commercial sort of construction work. Paints and products that it likes, your general household paints, so it's your enamels, your PBAs, interior, exterior, it stains, decking, sealants, stuff like that. Does not like textured paint, sand.
Yes.
Anything with sand in it. It's got a Pro Connect pump, and she doesn't like sand. So please, no textured paint.
All right. Now, what about some of the accessories that come with this thing?
Right, what you can expect in the box is obviously the unit. We've got a 15-meter hose. We've got a contractor's gun. It comes with two tips, 517, which will deliver around about a litre, plus minus 1.1 litres a minute. And its little baby brother, which is a 310, which will give you about 400 mils of paint a minute. It also comes with a spare unit filter. There's a filter in here. It comes with a spare one of those. And it comes with this little handy gadget, which is basically a Gardena fitting.
Okay.
So should the power go off and you've got paint in the machine and you need to get it out, instead of using electricity, you can just unscrew this little guy here. This is your sieve. And you screw this little guy on. And you can just put your hose pipe straight on the end of it.
Okay.
And then just run paint through firstly the pump, which will be in that position, your prime position, to clean the pump out, and then to clean out your hose and gun. So just with using normal water pressure, you can rinse the whole unit.
Okay, very convenient for load shedding.
Yeah, very
Now, another thing you just touched on was liters per minute. What sort of coverage could you get for a DIY machine like this?
Look, it's all depending on the thickness of the paint you're applying.
Okay.
Obviously, the bigger the orifice in the tip, the more paint it's going to put down. But we've timed, we can get about a square meter in 2.2 seconds.
Okay.
It's 10 times faster than the brush and 3 times faster than a conventional roller.
Wow.
So it really puts product down. Yeah.
Now that's brilliant for DIY. Another thing I know that is big with these machines is cleaning.
Yeah.
So you just mentioned that filter over there. What other kinds of tips or do's and don'ts could you give for cleaning a machine like this?
Airless machines like to be cleaned. Well, the reason being is obviously you don't want clogged tips, etc., etc., etc. The unit has 2 filters in it. It's got one inside here, internally, and it's got another filter in the handle of the gun, just to make sure there's no little bits going through, which is going to cause a blockage on the tip. Cleanliness, I cannot reiterate how important that actually is. If you've used something like an enamel, you need to rinse it with white spirit, turpentine, something like that, not thinners preferably, and then rinse it with warm soapy water afterwards, just to get the turpentine out. General PVAs and roof paints, etc., just rinse it out with warm soapy water until it runs crystal clear. Very important that it runs clear.
Okay, I'll remember that, guys. Another thing, PPE, safety equipment, very big thing in the industry. What can you tell us about that?
This is an airless unit, and airless units generate a lot of pressure, and that's how we actually atomize paint. We don't use any air, we pressurize the paint. When it gets to the tip and it escapes, it meets off or air, it breaks into a spray pattern. So we're working with around 200 bar on these machines. So skin injection is a hazard. It comes with a safety on the gun to stop it from being triggered when you don't expect it. But yeah, so gloves and safety goggles or glasses is kind of mandatory. You don't want to get paint in your eye, obviously. And if you're working with a solvent-based product, perhaps a dust mask or a respirator.
Okay. So, what can you tell us about these two machines over here? A little bit of introduction, what can they do, what can't they do, that type of thing.
Right, these little guys are basically our base units on our 2-bore lower pumps, which is a concept that most of our units use. So we're now graduating up towards more of towards your contracting range. Okay. So when I say contracting, would be good for townhouse complexes and that type of thing. Not a block of flats, we'd need to go maybe slightly bigger than that.
Okay.
All right. We're looking flow rate around about 2 litres a minute, and we're looking about 2.3 litres a minute that the machine can put down. They look very similar. They are actually of the same family. So this one's just slightly larger. When I say slightly larger, motor's a little bit more powerful, but the lower is exactly the same.
Okay, no, fair enough. Something else, do they come with different tip sizes or any of that sort of thing? Or?
They do. They'll support slightly larger tips than what we're used to, up to about probably a 23 thou, which will allow, as I say, about 2.2 litres a minute to be laid down.
Okay, accessory-wise, do these two come with the same kinds of accessories, or?
It'll come with a hose and a gun and
Okay.
a couple of tips. And replacement filters. Now the filter of these things is slightly different from what we're used to, and it has a larger filter actually on the unit. Let me just take it out for you so you guys can have a look. Excuse me, it's covered in oil. So it's a slightly larger filter than what we're used to. Okay, easy to clean, easy to access.
Perfect.
And then of course, as per usual, the gun's got a filter in it as well, which needs to be cleaned daily.
Sure, fair enough. Okay, now when it comes to these machines, are there any do's and don'ts that you'd like to highlight for us?
Okay. These little guys will handle a bit of textured paint. When I say textured paint, light texture, not like Microtix, which has really got a rough sand in it. So your sand paints that are now quite popular on the market, they'll handle. Perfect for roofing. Absolutely perfect for doing roofs, especially this little guy. He's light and it's easy to get onto a roof.
Awesome.
Absolutely perfect. Your normal PVAs, interior, exterior, stains, lacquers, and enamels that you would use in your household or commercial buildings.
Wow.
And floors, sorry.
And floors.
Yes, you
Wow.
can do floors as well.
That's perfect, eh?
Right, a couple of things. We have replacement pump units for both the GX21. This is a disposable unit. When you start seeing paint on the shaft, take it out and toss it away. Always a good idea to have a spare one in your toolbox on site so you can carry on with your job. All right. This guy is your endurance pump for your larger units. We do advise you have a spare one, reason being if your pump starts leaking on site, you could put another pump on, carry on with the job, and you can service this back at your office. So it is a fully serviceable unit. You do get replacement kits for it. Moving on, we have different types of filters. This is one of the larger filters, which will go with your 495 and your 390. Comes in different colors and different filter mesh sizes. Reason being, different thicknesses of paint. You have a gray, which is a 36 mesh. The mesh is there. The 60, which is the black 60 mesh. Moving on to 100, the blue, and a 200 mesh, which is what we normally use for stains and very, very light lacquers. Okay.
Right.
Why do we have filters? Basically to try and keep stuff away from your tip clogs. The nice thing about these tips is if you do clog, there's your spray position. You just turn the tip around, trigger the gun, and it should clear the clog on your tip. We have this product called TSL, which is a throat seal liquid. It's not an oil, it's a plasticizer. You need to put 5 to 10 drops on top of this every single day. It's not an oil. What it does is it stops paint from drying on the shaft. So it actually saves your top seals. Okay, very important. Please don't replace it with oil. You'll end up with fish eyes in your paint and drying problems with your product. So keep a bottle of TSL every day, guys. Please, about 5 or 10 drops. Different tips. We have low pressure tips and fine finish. And what a fine finish low pressure tip does, it uses much less pressure, so you get less overspray. Gives you a much softer and finer finish than your conventional industrial tips. And your paint should go a bit further as well. With the other tips you'll be looking at will be the blue tips, which is a Rack-X tip. This is more for your contractual work, PVAs, roof paints, that type of stuff.
Now something just on the tips I'd like to ask.
Yeah.
Each tip will always have a number.
Yes.
You know, 619, 617. Can you tell us what those numbers actually mean?
Yeah, this is a bit of wizardry, and once I've explained it, it'll help you guys a lot. In every tip you'll have between 3 and 4 numbers. Let's say you've got a 519 tip, okay. What do these numbers actually mean? The 5, this basically designates the size of your spray pattern. And to work that out, we say 5, doesn't matter, whatever the first number is, you times it by 5.
Okay.
So a 5 tip is going to give you a 25 centimeter spray bed. If it was a 3, it'll give you 150 millimeters. What we also always do, because you should spray 300 millimeters from the surface, but that's perfect science and we're not perfect. We always add another 5. So a 5 tip will give you a spray pattern of 25 to 30 centimeters at 30 centimeters from the surface. Okay.
Okay.
Right, being American, we work in inches. So what the 19 means is 19 thousandths of an inch. So that is the size of the hole. And what that designates is how much paint can throw through this tip in a minute.
Okay.
Obviously, the bigger the number, the bigger the orifice. And what it means, and now you'll get to, let's say you've got a 517 or a 519. Now you're going to say, but hang on, it's going to give me exactly the same spray pattern.
Yes.
Your second number is going to tell you how thick your paint's going to be. So if you move at a steady speed with a 517, you'll get X amount of build. If you move at exactly the same speed with a 519, you're going to end up with slightly thicker build.
Okay.
So that's what it means. All right.
Very interesting.
Okay. Spray technique. Very important thing with airless spray is you always need to overlap your spraying pattern. So let's say that's your first stripe you've just pulled there. Okay. So what you would do on your second pass, you will aim the gun at the bottom of your first stripe, okay, which is going to give you a 50% overlap. Okay. Now the guy's saying, well, it's a bit weird, why would you do that? If you don't do that, you're going to end up with very lean areas between the paint. Now if you took a stripe of paint and you cut through it and you put it under a microscope and you look from the side, that is what our spray pattern looks like. So it's thicker in the middle, it's thinner on the edges. So with a 50% overlap, what we're actually achieving is that.
Much more even surface.
Much more even surface. And because paint settles before it dries, that will actually settle down into an even surface.
Okay. Wow.
Secret of airless spray is you will use as little pressure as possible to achieve a decent spray pattern. Reason being, we don't want overspray. Overspray is wasted paint. So we set the machine on around about half power. We'll pull a stripe. Let's say your first stripe comes out with a paint stripe here. And then 2 thin paint stripes on either side with an open space in between. We call these tails, okay? And what tails are telling us is the pressure is just a little bit too low. We up the pressure a little, maybe 4 psi, 5 psi, until those tails disappear and you end up with one even stripe of paint. Your machine is set up perfectly.
Ah, wow, okay.
If you over-pressurize, you'll end up with chatter marks. Your paint will start doing this. So then you know you're over-pressured. Drop your pressure a little bit until that stops before the tails appear.
Okay. So this would be part of your startup procedure with every machine?
Every machine.
Okay.
What we often do as well, if you find, let's say you're busy in the middle of a job and you set your machine up perfectly, I very often take a picture with my cell phone of the pressure gauge on the unit. Tomorrow when you come back, you set it to the same pressure, you know you're on.
Okay, and then obviously you'd have different settings for different kinds of paint.
Different paints, yeah.
Okay.
Depending on how thick or thin.
All right, well, I think that we've covered all the bases here. Thanks very much, guys.
Super, thank you.
We're going to be emphasizing cleanliness, maintenance. So, Simon?
Thank you. Yes, thanks for having me again.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. So, what would you like to tell us about cleanliness and maintenance units?
Cleanliness on the airless unit is mandatory. I cannot emphasize how cleanliness actually can, if it's a dirty machine, what problems you can actually look at that. To start off with, just to take you through the pump element, basically what is what and what happens where. So we open up here. Basically also this has got a switch on it, so once this is open, the unit cannot run. It's a safety switch on here, so you could switch the unit on and off, you could put pressure on and off, the unit will not run with this door open. Then what we do is we just gently wiggle and the pump just slides out like that. And this is our pump element. This is a disposable element, it's not serviceable. So when you start seeing paint on the shaft or it starts dripping around, you know this pump element is finished. Now, handily enough, what we've managed to do is we actually built the tools that we need to open this pump on our unit. So here at the back of the unit, you'll notice there's a couple of different tools that has been supplied. This one here is to take out our pump element. We advise that a guy that purchases one of these units has a spare pump in his toolbox. Reason being that if he's on site and the unit starts leaking very badly and the unit can't maintain a fan or won't spray properly, you can just pop a new pump element in. It takes literally a couple of minutes. So that is your disposable pump unit. As I say, not serviceable. And all it does, it just moves in and out and pumps the product. When your unit is brand spanking new, we service or we test all of our units in the States with a light machine oil. So you need to flush every single unit with warm soapy water before you prime and load it with paint. Otherwise you're going to pick up a bit of problems with oil. Okay. So this will come in a packet with this white seal and one of these little, this is a thrust washer. Okay, that'll come in a packet. You just pop it out, toss this one in the bin and replace the unit. On replacing this, what is very important is you must hold the unit like this. Reason being, this thrust washer mustn't go into the housing skew, otherwise it'll ruin it, it'll destroy the housing of the pump. So what we do is we hold it upside down, just screw it in, just get the hand tight. And tight, and then just tighten it using the spanner again. You don't have to tighten it ridiculously tight, just firmly tight. It's got an O-ring in there so it'll seal nicely. Part of cleaning as well, what can very often happen is we've got a little ball inside here, ball and seat. If this is not cleaned properly, we tend to get the ball stuck. So again, they've supplied a spanner here for us. So we take the hoses off. Just be a little careful removing this because, as I said, there is a ball inside, as you can see there. Now, if that ball is full of paint, it will not release and you will not be able to prime or spray with the pump. So just give that a good clean as well. Okay. You shouldn't need to clean this every day if your cleaning technique is right. And when I say cleaning technique is right, you run clean water or solvent through the unit until it runs completely clear. Not sort of cloudy. If it's got cloudy, it's still got paint in it. So the unit comes with a couple of filters. The first one is built onto the pump housing itself. And it is here. This needs to be cleaned daily. And this is very often forgotten about. If your client phones you and tells you you cannot get a decent spray pattern on the machine, it is normally this little filter that hasn't been cleaned. So daily that needs to be cleaned. And what it does, it just pulls out. You can give it a nice brush off under a tap, and then just pop it back in again. Just like that.
And how often would you have to replace a filter?
As soon as you see it starts crashing, when you find you just can't clean it properly any longer, the unit does come with a spare one. So you do get a spare one, and you get them in packets of 5. They're really cheap. But that little guy is a problem. A lot of people forget about it. They don't clean it daily, and your machine will never hold a decent spray pattern.
Okay.
Use the spanner again. The tools are very handy. Right, so that's nice and tight again. Just before any cleaning or maintenance is done, you need to double check that there's no pressure on the machine. Okay. if you open a machine and there's pressure on the gauge, you're probably going to get hurt. Alright. The other thing we kind of also ask the guys to do if you're going to tighten these fittings is to use 2 wrenches, but not just one. Reason being, it may be really tight, the guy really gives it a bit of a pull, and maybe snaps one of these fittings off. So it's always advisable to use 2 wrenches. Right. So this, as we saw earlier, this shaft can actually move in and out. Okay. What we need to do is the length of this is quite important because it must slip back into the yoke inside here. So there's 2 locating pins to go on the pump. So what we do, just want to move that guy out of the way, is put it there. Ah, perfect. I was actually kind of spot on. And it just slides back in there. There's no bolts or anything to hold it down. It's on dowel pins, and this lid actually holds it down. Remember, your pump can't run unless this lid is closed. We've put an electrical safety feature in there. Right, so the pump is back in place. It's nice and firm. We close the door. It doesn't want to close. There we go. Just push it back slightly. Push it, and then what we do, you'll see there's a lock, unlock position. We just slide it back till it's locked. It has another safety cover over the top, just to make sure it stays locked, and that just clips on top of there like that. The other filter we were talking about is in your gun. So what you do is you just unclip the handle to get it out the way, unscrew the handle here. It has got a place for a spanner in case there's a bit of paint on it. And inside you will find your other filter element, which is that there. Alright, just give it a good clean with a nice paintbrush, whatever the case is, pop it back in the handle. One word of warning, and I've seen it fairly often, is sometimes the guys put it in the wrong way around. They have to force it to put it in. You will destroy the filter trying to get it out. So, very important, the little coloured guy sits towards the top. And it's spring loaded, so once that's clean, so daily cleaning, really important.
And I'm assuming when you replace that filter, it's the same thing, patterns sort of thing.
Yeah, as I say, you'll start to see wear of it and it'll start crushing. It's kind of time. I would imagine if it's well maintained, you'll probably get about probably 200 or 300 litres of paint through it before you need to replace it. Hit the handle back. Ready to rock and roll. Make sure the trigger guard is on before you start pressurizing any part of the machine. There we go. While we've got the gun in hand, you'll notice that the tip guard has got flat surfaces and it's got sort of finger surfaces. Rather don't over tighten this thing, okay? Rather only hand tighten it, but hand tighten it decently. Okay. And if you're going to change the position from so this is a removable complete pump element. The reason why we do it so it's quick to remove is that most contractors will have a spare one of these on site. So should you end up getting paint coming out of this part of the pump, you can quickly remove it. The first thing we do is unscrew the suction hose. Okay, take off the pipe from the back of the pump. Okay, loosen the lock nut. You normally need to tap it with a hammer. It's just slightly more than hand tight. Then we can open the door and the pump just literally slides out like that. You can pop a new one back in, take this back to your office and service it. To service it will take about 20 minutes to replace the seals.
I love that you guys make it so simple to replace your pumps.
It's handy, especially on site. You know,
Yes.
The last thing you want to do is have a machine that's sitting 300 or 400 kilometers away from a shop where you can, from an Ardendorf's branch, where you can actually go and pick up a new one.
Yep.
But you actually got one in your toolbox.
Exactly.
All right, so that's it reattached. We just slide that little guy back in there, close the door, spin that closed. I'm just going to give it a little tap with the hammer just to show you how tight it needs to be. Really not tight at all. There we go. Bob's your uncle. Put on your suction hose again. I said this can be a little tight sometimes. Put a little bit of TSL onto it, just to slip it back in there. Hand tight, ready to go. This again, please. Filters. Talking about filters again. This one has got a slightly different filter system. It's got a larger filter. Again, before you strip anything on the machine, make sure we're sitting on 0 pressure. You don't want any energizing in the filter. Okay. This should be hand tight. We have put a spanner place on it. Try not to have to use it, and if you're going to use a spanner, double check that it's not because there's pressure on the unit. Okay. Unscrew this little guy, and there's your filter element. You can remove it, give it a good clean. Again, when it becomes clogged or maybe a little torn after use, just replace it with another one. They're freely available. Okay. And that just clean the housing out inside, and there we go.
Really is as simple as that.
Simple as that. And just again, hand tight.
Awesome. That's it. That's 390, I believe.
That's it. Thank you very much.
We would just went through the 390 as far as I know the 5 is exactly.
Slightly bigger brother, slightly more powerful, and can support a slightly larger tip size. In other words, you can put down a bit more paint. The other major difference is this one's got a suction pickup that actually goes into the bucket. With this unit, you tilt it back, get your bucket of paint underneath, and then your bucket will actually sit here around it. So it picks up from here. You will have a strainer on the end of it. Pump changing exactly the same as what we did on the 390. Obviously just loosen the star nut, take off the pipe, take off the suction, and pop the pump out, pop the new one in. Again, the filter is sitting under here. Check the pressure, no pressure. Same elements as the 390. Okay. One of the other nice features on this, it's got what we call a smart control, basically. What smart control does, it's fantastic if you're spraying a roof and you've got your smart control switched on and you've got everything running beautifully and the unit senses that you've run out of paint, it stops.
Oh wow.
So it never runs dry. Pumps don't like running dry, they generate heat and they melt the seals. Okay. So that's really, really nice. And if you want a roof, your paint's finished, the unit will stop. Okay. The pump is exactly the same as the 390, the filter is exactly the same as the 390. Just on a stand, and we've got the smart control on. Right, today we're using an extension cord. Just a couple of hints about an extension cord, not longer than 20 meters. If you're using a reel type, please unwind the whole wire. The reason being, if it stays coiled, it forms an electromagnet and it steals amps. Also, make sure that it's a medium to heavy duty cable, not one of these really thin ones. What we're going to do now, we're not using a generator today, but if you are using one, please use one that's got an inverter on it, just to flatten out in your power spots. But remember again, not longer than 20 meters, please. What we're going to do is we're going to flush the unit just to make sure there's no oil, residual oil. We test our units in America with oil just to make sure that everything works and holds pressure. So I just want to quickly flush it out quickly. What we do, we move the machine into flush position. We make sure there's no pressure on the switch. Once you do so, we switch the unit on. There's a switch on the side here. And what we do is we gently bring the pump on. And you see that it's picking water up here and returning it to the bucket. That means it's actually primed the pump unit. What we do now is we stop the unit again. We move the prime spray switch to spray. We need to load the gun now. We remove the tip. Oops. And we trigger the gun into a bucket. We bring on the machine again. And what we're doing is we're just making sure there's no residual paint or anything in the line. I want to make sure it's primed. So we're priming all the way through the pipe to the gun. Right, it's primed. Hold it open while you switch the pump off. Otherwise what you do is you build pressure in the line, you trigger the gun and it's going to spray back at you. So what we need to do now is we need to bring the paint. And we're going to prime the unit with paint. Bearing in mind about one thing, if you just observe where the machine is drawing the paint from, it takes it from the bottom of the bucket. So stirring is really, really important. If you don't stir your paint and you've got sediment sitting at the bottom, the first thing the unit is going to suck is paint, or thick paint, and you're going to pick up problems. So what we're going to do now is we're going to prime the unit. So we put it back to prime. We hold this over the bucket and we bring it onto prime. You'll notice it will start picking paint up all the way through. Right, so now we've primed the pump with paint, okay? We now need to do the same with our gun. So again, we trigger the gun into the bucket and bring the pressure on. Right, so we now have paint all the way to the gun. Put the trigger guard on, put our tips back on, and let it jump. So what we're going to do now is just turn that because I want to spray diagonally. Is we are going to pressurize our line. So leave the trigger guard on, bring the pressure on. Right. I'm going to pull a test line just to see where the pressure is, if we need a bit more pressure. Pressure is sufficient. I think the pressure is a little high. I'm going to drop it a little. We'll try it again. Pressure's too low now, you see. So somewhere between where it's sitting now and where it was in the beginning. I'm going to bring the pressure up a bit. I'm happy with that. We're getting a nice coverage on the line. Okay. You'll notice I hold the hose in my other hand. Reason being, if you don't, then the weight of the hose plays with your gun. Okay. Rule of spraying is you work 30 centimeters from the surface and you try and keep your gun as flat to the surface as possible. This takes quite a bit of practice, guys. Otherwise, you're going to end up with what I'm going to show you now. You'll notice the pattern looks like a dog bite. So the paint in the middle is fine, it's lean on the sides. Okay. So important, keep your hand perpendicular to the surface. Right, most importantly, we've still got pressure on the unit, so what do we need to do? Turn our pressure down completely, and we need to get the pressure that's in our hose back down into the paint. So we gently release this, and we actually put the pressure back into the hose. You'll notice the pressure gauge dropped considerably. Now, a lot of guys moan that we waste the paint that's in the hose. There's about a litre of paint in the hose, but we actually don't. So what we're going to do now is we're going to put the pickup, about 2 seconds, into clean water. So we just give that a bit of a shake, just to get the excess water off, our paint, sorry, beg your pardon, and we transfer it into the water. So with the pump in prime position again, we're now going to suck clean water up, push it through the pump, and we're going to push the paint back into the bucket. And we stop. you see, it's a bit watery. Okay, a bit watery there. So we're going to take off the pressure. We put this in there as well. Now we want to remove the paint from the hose. First thing we do, we take off the tip and tip guard. And we drop those into the bucket. And we're going to get to those just now. Okay. So now what we do, we need to get the paint out of the hose. So we do the same process. We put the sprayer into spray mode. We hold the gun right on the edge of the bucket. Trigger it. You must trigger it. Bring on the pressure slowly. Right, that's what happens when you get a bit carried away. Right, so we have the paint back in the container. We now to rinse the gun. So what we do again, we trigger the gun, keep it to the side of the bucket, otherwise you're going to get covered in paint. And we just run the unit for a couple of minutes. We'll need to change the water 2 or 3 times to get it clean. Or alternatively, we can do what we're going to do now. And that is, in that finished later, I'm going to put a fitting on here now. This fitting, in fact, thank you very much. And we can now put the unit straight onto a hose pipe instead of emptying the bucket all the time. We still will need to empty this bucket because we're going to rinse into the bucket. So we're just pushing clean water straight from the hose all the way through the unit. Right, so notice the water is just about coming clean. What I'm going to do now is I'm actually going to switch the position so we can flush this out as well. Which is already pretty clean. Put the gun back together. Here I'm rinsing it. Okay, can we open again, please? Now, a lot of people will think this water is clean already. It's not. There's still quite a bit of PVA in here, and PVA acts like wood glue. And what it'll do, it'll actually make the ball inside your unit stick, and your unit won't prime properly. So it's still a little milky. I'm going to let it run a little bit longer. It's coming there almost. So it's starting to clear nicely now. Right, I'm pretty happy with that. We can switch off, please. Right, now obviously we've got the last filter inside the unit that we need to clean. This is the filter that a lot of people forget about, and if you don't clean it, you're going to pick up major problems with your spray pattern. And you'll be phoning on and off and saying, oh, my machine won't spray properly, and I promise you, it's this little filter that's dirty. So we take off the hose first. There's an O-ring in here, so it's a little tight. It doesn't get up easily. There's the little guy.
Ah,
So that needs to be cleaned daily, please.
okay.
Right, I'm going to take it away and clean it. Okay.